practitioners who are entering into a new practice or into a new business, familiarize yourself with the client stories. It's important that you are a visible face of the organization externally. If a practitioner is running an effective practice, they are viewed as a trusted advisor to not just the traditional AEs, CSMs, but it's everybody who is servicing that customer experience. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. And enablement should never be in the position of being forced to be a check the box exercise, ever, because that just dilutes the purpose.
Would you communicate with the managers if your reps are really struggling with certain things, or you keep it between enablement and the reps to really keep this safe environment for them to come back?
Great question.
Hey Megan, how's it going?
Hey Michael, I'm great. How are you?
Can't complain. Almost, settled in our new apartment, and we underestimated how much time and work we have to put into furnishing this place. Living off Airbnb for quite some times, but yeah, we're almost there. Can't complain.
Well, that's good. I guess as long as you have a place to lay your head at night, you're in a good place.
That is true. That is true. Look, I'm super pumped having you on the show. Before we start, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better and just tell us a little bit about your journey and what you're working on these days.
Sure. So I came to the enablement space after being a seller, although I wasn't selling in the SaaS space. I was selling John Deere tractors to racetracks and horse farms, which everyone gets a kick out of. But that was really my first introduction into proper solution selling. I couldn't go in slinging the latest and greatest green tractor. I had to go in and understand what problem my clients were looking to solve and then align the appropriate piece of equipment to what they were trying to do. And I didn't know it then. I didn't recognize that as solution selling. But that was my first foray into enablement because as I was traveling through my territory, I learned very quickly that I hit my quota a lot faster if I went directly to the John Deere dealership and taught those ladies and gentlemen how to sell to horse people, as opposed to me going to 2 or 3 dozen farms in a week. And they really became my multiplication factor. And that was really when the wheels started to turn of, I wonder if there are other places that this multiplication can happen. And so I really stumbled my way into enablement. After I left sales, I started working for ExactTarget that was acquired by Salesforce. From there, I moved from Emarsys that was acquired by SAP. I moved from Lessonly that was acquired by Seismic. You can kind of see the trend here. I really enjoy helping companies scale and investing in their go-to-market teams to provide what those teams need to be successful. I'm currently serving as the head of enablement at Zylo, which is a classically scale-up software company based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Our software helps teams like procurement teams, IT teams, look at their tech stack and identify places where there's too much waste or identify places where renewals can be optimized. And we're able to drive outcomes with realized hard cost savings, cost avoidance, compliance, and inventory visibility. The projects I'm working on now, doing some onboarding because they don't have any. So I'm helping build out the onboarding. But importantly, I'm focusing on a value selling program for our strategic account executives to help them think about this idea of solution selling, learning the customer's problems and aligning the value of our solution to solve them.
You know what? When is the time that you're going to take this guys public or, just look for acquisition? It seems like this is a pattern. You bring this with you, every company.
For better or for worse, and I certainly am not claiming credit for the acquisition activity, but I certainly can claim credit for supporting the go-to-market teams through big times of change and to helping prepare and to scale the business and acting as that strategic advisor to the teams to help us move in that right direction.
I love it. Look, you work with a lot of great brands, obviously. You help them, achieve success. And also, I know you ran a restaurant. So
Yes.
I want to talk about that too, because, before dive right into enablement and everything corporate, it's always fascinating to me when I see other people with, some entrepreneurial background. And I wanted to hear from your perspective, running a restaurant, um, I think I read somewhere you said it flipped your whole sales mindset. But what did it teach you that you didn't actually learn from, SaaS world?
So let's take a step back here, real quick, just to give some context to your audience. So, my husband and I met in Rome, Italy. Oh my gosh, probably 20 years ago at this point. And when we moved back to the US, he had always been in restaurants. I had never worked a restaurant a day in my life. But when we moved to Indianapolis, he couldn't find the food that he wanted. So he opened up a restaurant that's called Subito. It's actually a few blocks from where I'm sitting today. And over the past 10 years, he has built this business. And we had an opportunity to appear on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives with Guy Fieri earlier this year. But I took an opportunity last year to step away from corporate America to really invest into the business and help him stand up some operational processes, build things like onboarding for his team. We have over 15 employees now, and to really help him shore up. So we were prepared for this influx of business that we were told would be coming. And candidly, it has come, and it was really good that we had this time to shore things up to be prepared for it. But what I learned in that stint, in that time, Michael, is that customer interaction, to be truly on the front lines. And I think as enablement practitioners, a lot of us have an opportunity to get closer to the customer. You might argue that go to market is your internal customer, which is true. But at the end of the day, you are equipping those go to market individuals to service the customer. And if you are missing that connection with the customer, you're missing a huge opportunity. So from the restaurant perspective, I had the opportunity to get very intimate with our customers, being down there for lunch every single day, learning what's working, what's not working, observing how they behave and interact in the restaurant. Those principles can be applied into our enablement work. Getting clarity on the client life cycle, getting clarity on what that journey looks like so that the efforts that I'm doing are that much more impactful.
I'm really curious about what you said. So,
Mhm.
looking at our go-to-market teams right now, how do you really do this inside a SaaS company? Man, I'm an AE. Do you get on a call with me? You take, client conversations? What would you do exactly?
We do a couple of things. I think the baseline 101, especially for practitioners who are entering into a new practice or into a new business, familiarize yourself with the client stories. And those can be the public facing ones on, the marketing team is put together, but it's also those anecdotal stories. What are those niche use cases that your customer success managers or your strategic account executives are trying to help their clients find success in with these niche things? You've got to familiarize yourself with what the customers are doing. It's important to get the information around product adoption, right? And you can, in most products, you can get that information relatively easily. You need to make sure your teams are getting to that information relatively easily. But it's also about engaging with the clients if you have customer events. Here at Zylo, we just had an opportunity to host what we call our SaaSme customer
Mhm.
event, and we were highlighting customers. I was able to engage with those customers. It's important that you are a visible face of the organization externally. And there's so many different ways that you can do that. Engage with them on LinkedIn. Follow some of your key customers on LinkedIn to understand what challenges they're posing or how are they conversing with people in the space. That is all important context that you can then bring back internally to your business, not only to share with those go-to-market teams that are servicing those clients directly, but there could also be an opportunity to provide insights to your more executive partners.
This is really, really, really interesting, and I want to get a little tactical. I literally want to ask you, like, what sort of messaging you send to your, clients, let's say on LinkedIn, because yes, if it's an event, it makes sense. Like
Mhm.
you want to be there. And by the way, this is a very unique perspective because most enablers try to be, a
Behind the
little bit
scenes.
behind the scene,
Huh?
right? I'm serving my internal, clients, but
Mhm.
being out there as part of the, entire go-to-market team, I think
Mhm.
it's very, very important, and it can help you even grow in your career because you're going to be client facing too.
100%. And don't forget the aspect of credibility.
Hmm.
For practitioners who choose, or maybe they just don't know, to engage with that customer facing lens, they're missing out on big opportunities. They're not going to get the context, the understanding of what's happening in the market or what's truly happening with customers. And if
Hmm.
a company doesn't have customers, you don't have a company.
Yep.
And as enablers, we are responsible for ensuring that we're equipping our teams with the skills, the processes, the resource to service those customers. Well, if you're
Hmm.
not looking past that, there is a world where you might not have customers to service.
I completely agree with you, and I think there's another aspect to this is that if I sell to someone as a seller and
Mhm.
ask for feedback, because there are parts that I could improve, they might not feel comfortable sharing. But if you come as an enablement professional and say, "Hey, I'm helping these folks," like
Mhm.
Michael just sold to you, I'm
Mhm.
sure there are areas that he could do better. Can we have a conversation? So maybe it can be like a third party getting involved and do that assessment. And I think clients might be more open to share real feedback. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I think that perspective of enablers entering into those client facing, call them win loss reviews or double check ins, I think it depends on a couple of things. I think it depends on the maturity of the organization itself. So if I'm a startup and I'm a practitioner at a startup, I can totally see that enablement, like reaching out to the customers. The more mature the company, the more likely you are to have a product marketing team
Hmm.
or the resources to engage with a third party to do some of those analyses. But a
Hmm.
practitioner should always have access to the data of those conversations, whether you're driving it on your own or if you're getting that from a teammate or from a third party source. That should always be a data point in some of the decisions that you're making.
So let me understand this a little bit better. Product marketing, of course, can reach out to clients. This is a typical,
Mhm.
way that we do this, right? What different insights or let's say way of running these conversations enablements can bring to the table that you think might be missing today?
I think enablement practitioners have an intimate knowledge of what good looks like and how things are supposed to go. So, my line of questioning, if I was talking to a customer, my line of questioning would be more along the behavioral route,
Hmm.
whereas a product marketer might be sitting more in the how did the product work? What was the adoption
Hmm.
like? And they certainly would be asking questions on the overall experience. But I think a practitioner would go about it in a slightly different way and a bit more targeted toward was the experience that you received the
Hmm.
experience that we have been prepping and priming our teams to
Hmm.
deliver because very often there is a chasm between the two.
So why don't we get enablers involved in this
Mm.
more often?
Well, I think the more traditional view, and it's not wrong, that
Mhm.
enablement services the internal customers, right? That is our top priority. However, the serving the customer with the end in mind, that's really the mandate for the practitioner. I
Mhm.
am not a proponent of including enablement doing client conversations
Yeah.
in an enablement charter. I don't
Mhm.
really sit in that camp, but I do sit in the camp of us having access to the data, potentially influencing the questions that might need to be
Mhm.
asked, especially if we're starting to know or observe customer surveys coming back and we say, oh, geez, that's not the result that we were aiming for. And
Mhm.
being able to influence what those conversations look like, definitely in that camp.
This is really fascinating. And you know what it tells me? What if we need enablement not only for our sales team, but
Mhm.
also for our product marketing team, for whoever is actually
Absolutely.
client facing?
Mhm.
So having a list of questions is great, but how to ask and who to ask those questions, I think is something that enablement can definitely help other teams.
Mhm.
I wanted to get your perspective on this too.
Yes. I think if a practitioner is running an effective practice,
Hmm.
they are viewed as a trusted advisor and a strategic department or a strategic partner rather to not just the traditional AEs, CSMs, but it's everybody who is servicing that customer experience. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, that's what this is all about, is servicing the customer. And so I do think that enablement has an opportunity. I mean, we should be partnering with product marketing, for example, right? But there is a world where we could be partnering with product marketing in a different way than what we classically do. Where we might be able to say, hey, product marketing, when you go run down the list of these 10 closed lost customers from last quarter or whatever, here's some observations that I have made. Here's what the data is telling me. Time permitting, can you dig into those and report back to me and let me know what you think? I can't imagine somebody saying no, right? Because we all have the same mutual goal at the end of the day.
This is really, really great. And I think running bigger organizations like you did, you mentioned Seismic, Lessonly, these are all companies with, global teams,
Mhm.
multiple different, people from different demographics, you work with senior execs, you work with end users.
Mhm.
So I wanted to get your step-by-step framework, if you will, if you call it that.
Sure.
How do you, roll out the enablement value chain across the global team? I'm really fascinated learning this from you.
Very good question. Well, step number one, well, I don't know if you call it step number one, but definitely a key step, is ensuring that every effort that enablement is signing up to do is aligned to that overall corporate objective.
Hmm.
If our efforts are anywhere else but there, that practice is doomed to fail. And it doesn't matter if you're working in a company of 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. The efforts that enablement does have to be aligned to what that overall corporate objective is. That's step one.
Hmm.
And I think as a practice is built, whether that is a new person coming in and trying to reestablish a practice, or if it's the annual overhaul of what that practice looks like, that practitioner needs to be in lockstep with what decisions are being made at the business level to ensure that the team's efforts are continuously aligned to that. Pause there. That's step one. You don't have that. You can't have strategic conversations. You can't have the boundary setting conversations. Like that is step one.
Okay. So now let me ask you a follow-up question for that. That tells me a lot about impacting revenue. Of
Mhm.
course, like there are other, aspect to the business that we can help with, but to really position ourselves as a strategic, professionals who help move the business, forward, we need to tie what we do to, business ROI, right? I wanted to hear your thoughts on, some of the mistakes, like typical mistakes new enablement leaders make when they're trying to prove that ROI.
Sure. How many people took my lesson? How many people showed up to my training? That's all well and good. And I think in a practitioner's world, that's important to document because that's a building block to help you get to where you need to be. But I would caution anybody against sharing that with their executive right out of the gate. Because
Mhm.
if you share those numbers without the context of how that helped deliver or maybe not deliver a business outcome, it's meaningless. So I always like to think of it in terms of the engagement drives the behavior change or the adoption that we're looking to see, which should then result in the business outcome. So if you look at it through the context of those three stages, yes, people that take the training, that do the certification, show up to the session, you name your metric, that's important in the context of where that falls, especially in that middle section of the behavior change.
Hmm. Tell me a little bit more about these behavioral changes. Like,
Mhm.
what are the typical um, things that you always track, regardless of the size of the organization you work with? You say, hey, if I have this reports on this behavioral changes, I can go to my execs and say, hey, we did a phenomenal job at enablement.
hmm I think it varies. I think as an organization, we can certainly align. And again, this is hitching our wagon to those overall corporate objectives. If we have clarity on, let's make up a number, Michael. Let's just say the organization wants a 10% increase in revenue for the year. Like that's the North Star.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay. So then I'm going to break that down and I'm going to say, when I look at my account executives, we want them to increase maybe the size of their deal. So that would be an average contract value increase. Okay. How do we do that? Well, my mind goes to I want to make sure that they are doing proper discovery so that we are uncovering all of the stones, right? We're going to
Mhm.
try to understand all the problems that we're looking to solve. So I would institute a program that maybe where we lean into discovery to
Mhm.
ensure that we're asking the right questions, asking them at the right time, and using that information to help us propel that deal forward in a place where we can sell more SKUs. That's just off the top of my head.
Mhm. Mhm.
But when I think about that behavior change component of it, those are a little bit more difficult to track. I don't necessarily have a Salesforce report that I can pull up right away and I can see that I've trended up or trended down.
Mhm.
Thankfully, there are many new tools on the market that allow us to get a bit more insight into that qualitative behavior.
Mhm.
But with each initiative that we run, they're going to be slightly different because if I'm focusing on discovery for my account executives in an effort to increase the deal size, which would hit that increase of revenue, maybe on the post sale side, I might be looking at something different, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I need to understand, are we properly multi threaded on the
Mhm.
post sale side to ensure that we're having better product adoption, or we're a little bit stickier, so I can make sure we're securing that renewal and setting myself up to get better upsells next quarter. Like, and that would require a little bit of a different view of what those qualitative behaviors would be.
Hmm.
So while the North Star metric can remain the same, the micro view of it would be adjusted depending on the initiative in the team as it relates to qualitative behavior.
Very interesting. So tell me a little bit more about this qualitative, let's say, analysis you guys run, and what sort of feedback you receive from the exec team. Because again, it's not about numbers, and a CRO, even a CEO, they might want to share, some of these numbers with the board. But how do they react when you guys talk about, some of these behavior changes?
hmm They're very interested in it. I'm very fortunate at Zylo that we have a very intimate small team. And so they're very keen to understand what's happening with the team, what's going for better or for worse, right? So the qualitative piece is the most difficult to quantify,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So much of what I'm sharing is personal observation based on what I have seen in the field, listening back to calls. We use AI role play to also help us where we can get a bit more of a scaled view of how things are going with the practice.
Yeah.
And I can deliver those insights back up to the executive. But again, we're delivering it through the context of where we are in the process. It's never just finger lick of the wind. I think Michael did a really good job in his practice this week. That's not going to do a whole lot. But if I say, hey, if I look at Michael and his teammates, 60% of them participated in our asynchronous learning, 70% maybe participated in the live session. When I look at how we're doing as far as it relates to our practice scores, I can see that those people that participated in the training have a higher practice score. And oh, by the way, those people that participated in the session, in the practice that we asked them to do as it relates to the behavior change, those are the ones that are on track to hit their pipeline number or
Mhm.
hit their quota. Time and time again, we see that those people that invest in enablement tend to do better at the end of the day. It's not a windfall, of course. You certainly have people who participate that don't hit it, but
Mhm.
enablement doesn't control all of it. Right.
Absolutely. And I think that enablement can contribute a lot in better forecasting. Again, if we have a mindset and a
Mhm.
methodology around what to really track, even if it's not about only numbers, but if we constantly, you mentioned about role plays, you mentioned about you know listening to those calls and seeing the trends. If we
Mhm.
continuously do this, I think we can even help and contribute with better forecasting, which almost everybody's like getting it wrong. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails? These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai.
What I'm also hearing from you, Michael, is another tool of the trade for practitioners and kind of at a 101 level is setting up competency frameworks
Mhm.
so that we can very clearly understand, and also the sellers and the CSMs, that they understand what's expected of them and what good looks like. That can equip us much better for coaching conversations and can also influence that forecast number. If I have a new hire coming on board and I can see right out of the gate that they're struggling with objection handling, guess where I'm going to go when I go to coach that individual? Like right away. If I didn't have that framework set up where I knew what I needed to look for, that person could be 6 months in seat, 9 months in seat before we figure out, like, oh, objection handling is a bit of a challenge, right?
Absolutely. Look, now we learned. Okay, we learned about companies' bigger vision. Right now, we know what to work on, what ROI really means to our execs. We have tools, we have systems, we know what to track to make sure every individual is getting better, and we track all those behavioral changes. How do we build an alignment between senior leadership, you
Hmm.
got your VPs, and then you got frontline managers
Hmm.
that are absolutely, stretched thin in terms of like timeline, in terms
That's
of like bandwidth. And also the end users, like people practice, certain ways, especially when they get more seasoned.
right.
And they're
Hmm.
like, oh, I arrived. I've been doing this for 10 years. How do we build this alignment when we want to bring change?
Hmm. I'll flip that on you, Michael, as a seller. It's all about multi-threading, and it's all about running your process. That's what it's about. You mentioned various stakeholders in that.
Mhm,
And when I think about an initiative that's coming on board, stop number one for me is aligning with the executive team that that's where my time needs to be spent.
mhm,
And by the way, if I'm asked to do a project that I don't suspect is aligned here, I'm going to ask, is this where
mhm,
you want me to spend my time? Just wanted to double check. And
mhm,
also coming with the point of view on my suspicion is that my time is better spent on project A, but I'm getting nudges on project B. Can you
mhm.
help me prioritize that? Like that is step one. Because if you don't have that executive alignment,
Yeah, you're done.
we should just end the podcast, right? It's like it's all over. So executive alignment's number one. Then the next thing I'm going to do is do a couple of different things. Sometimes I work my way down the line. I'll go to those VPs, I'll go to the frontline managers, I'll go to my end users and just kind of get a sense for what's happening. Sometimes I can take a data driven approach. I can say, okay, here's our target of what we're trying to achieve. Here is where we currently are today. I'm going to go have a couple of interviews and understand what is causing this chasm, what is causing this gap. And again, I'm going in with curiosity, I'm
Mhm,
going in with empathy, but I'm also going in with a point of view because sometimes I'll talk to people that don't know. So I might gut check or pressure test my point of view in that conversation to say, my gut tells me that we haven't focused really well on the way that we are positioning this particular product. What kind of impact do you think that's making on this revenue chasm?
mhm.
Get their perspective. They might say, you're totally right. But they might also say, no, I don't think that's it. I think it's. So sometimes coming in with that point of view can also help unstick a stuck conversation as well.
I completely agree with you. We need that alignment. Otherwise, like, it's better not to even get started with anything. But let's talk about end users because it's you're a seller. So I want to get some seller's perspective involved as well.
Yep.
Um, do you guys spend enough time to really understanding like if this seller really needs this sort of enablement or not, and if they do, can we clearly communicate the why behind it? Because otherwise, the adoption that we might get from the end user might be completely different, even
Totally.
though you have senior leadership approval. So I wanted to hear some of the ways that you actually ran these programs and got really good adoption from the end user.
Yes. So I think in more mature enablement practices, we typically tend to have the resources to do more bespoke enablement, both
Hmm.
from an audience perspective, but then also from an individual perspective, Michael. Because what I heard you say was, for those folks that keep hitting their quota, who are really good with the customers, like they don't need the enablement because they can do X, Y, Z. And I totally get it. And enablement should never be in the position of being forced to be a check the box exercise
Hmm.
ever, because that just dilutes the purpose. So I've worked in practices where if you have a big marquee program, you might set up that initial test. And if you test out, you're good to go. Like you have proven that you can do the thing, whatever the thing is, and you can move on with your day. But if you take that test and you aren't successful, then I'm going to put you through the paces to help you be successful.
Hmm.
So I've seen that work as a good tactic of just, prove that you can do it. We'll give you the badge, the
Yeah.
certificate, like whatever you want, but prove that you can do the thing. And if you can do the thing, I'm going to leave you alone, except when I want to pull you in to help teach your teammates, because they're more likely to listen to you than they are to me.
I love this because this resonates a lot, by the way. Like,
Good.
smart
I'm glad.
enablers, done that in the past with even myself. I remember, hey, you're a senior, you got your numbers, you're on top of a chart. Don't come to the sessions. You're good if you want to, by all means. But do you want to run a session with us, like in 2 weeks? I think this is a very, very smart approach because you get, peer-to-peer sort of practice. And also it helps the more senior, tenured reps that are, a player position. It's like I'm contributing to the team. It's not that I'm forced to be part of this, let's say, enablement program. I'm
Mhm.
contributing. I'm helping my enablement team. I think
Mhm.
that's really actually powerful.
That's exactly right. And again, I want to be in a position where I am providing a mechanism for people to drive revenue generating activities.
Hmm.
If I'm not doing that,
Hmm.
pull me out by the hook and crook, right? Like, get me out. Because if enablement's treated as a check the box
Hmm.
exercise, no one will be successful.
Hmm.
No one. It's almost like, a seller being forced to like fill out the check boxes in Salesforce. Like they've got to know the context and the why behind the what. And if I can come to a seller and I can say, hey, listen, we're running this certification based on what I've observed, based on what the data is telling me, you're quite strong in this area.
Hmm.
But in an effort to ensure that everybody's on a level playing field, I would really like you to do XYZ activity to prove to the business that you're good to go. And if you finish this, you're off and running. But Michael, I would really love to partner with you to showcase your skills to your teammates in 2 weeks' time. What do you think?
Yeah, I love this approach. I think this is very, very smart. And I don't know anyone who comes and said, no, I don't want to do it. Why not? Like, you're part of a team. And I've never seen anyone show resistance this way.
Mhm.
It's a very smart approach.
And I think frontline managers appreciate that approach too, because
Hmm.
it also helps them better. They know how to stack rank their team. Like
Yeah.
they know where their team is. And they might even be able to say to me, hey, Megan, let's go take Michael and employee B and employee C, and let's put them in that bucket of they take the test, but then I want everybody else to take the full certification. I've
Hmm.
also seen where empowering managers to kind of determine who needs to be doing that initial test or
Hmm.
who they think would test out also empowers the manager to help carry that enablement message into the meeting and also help to reinforce what it is that we need to do, as opposed to enablement just blanket saying, Michael, you're in, Megan, you're out. Like that doesn't feel good.
I love this. Like, I have a story. I remember it was end of quarter. Everybody's fighting to get their numbers. And we had this meeting with enablement and marketing, and they got everybody on the call. And the
And
VP wasn't there. And they said, in 2 weeks, we have this program that we're going to start running. It's like end of quarter. We want you guys to do this. You're chosen to. I was like, good luck. Apparently, nobody showed up except for a few, new hires. It's like, what do you expect? Like,
Mhm.
it's end of quarter. Even the timing is, off, and you never actually partner up with the managers, and you went all the way to VP to get approval to come and force something. So those even managers behind their back, like it's happening, guys. It's not only reps talking. Come say, this is crap, go do your thing, because they have to prove their efficacy of practice too. They said, hey, my team is managed properly, that's why we hit the quota. And
Mhm.
guess what, they're not going to pay attention to your program if you're
No.
not aligned, with their goals. At the end of the day, you're serving those teams as well, so your job is to help them actually do better.
Yes. Yes. I've often found too, Michael, like if there's ever a company mandate of like, we have to do this thing, because those come down the line, right? I always like to tee up options and to
Mhm.
also identify the risks. Like, okay, so if we roll this out at the end of the quarter, I suspect my hypothesis is we're going to create a distraction to the team, which could then impact the way that we name your metric, fill the pipeline, close the deals, whatever. As an alternative, I would suggest that instead of getting everybody on live phone calls, let's do some asynchronous enablement, maybe some like Slack drip campaigns over the next 2 weeks that aren't filled with actions, but filled
Mhm.
with interesting information or something to help us set up the table to launch at the start of the new quarter. This would
Mhm.
reduce the noise. This would reduce the risk that we would have to deal closure, pipeline growth, whatever the metric is. But I think providing options and also identifying the risks can present compelling arguments to the business as to why the decision they're making may not be the best in the interest of the field.
And like giving that reality check is the way to position any enabler as a strategic,
Mhm.
individual, rather than
Mhm.
someone who's just order taking. No,
Correct.
saying no because I have some perspective that you might not see. If you want, again, your end of quarter or whatever the agenda is, if you
Mhm.
really want to have the positive impact on your revenue,
Mhm.
this is not the way you're going to do it.
Correct.
Can I ask you a question about actually this, because it's interesting? I had another guest on the show, and he said the way I add value to my reps is by getting my enablement folks involved literally in the deal.
Mhm.
So some of these folks go and check, Salesforce and look at deals and listen to call recordings and then get back to reps,
Mhm.
say, hey, I see that you need to send out this, let's say, RFP. I can help you actually fill that out. I see that you struggle with getting engagement, 3 emails in and they don't give answer. This is the approach I would suggest.
Mhm.
Do you think this is the right way for enablement teams, not necessarily leadership, but enablement specialists to really work with sellers hand in hand, or it's just overkill?
Well, I don't think it's overkill. I think whenever a practitioner can attach themselves to that revenue generating activity, it's a good move to make. Now, the only caveat that I will say is that if you have somebody who really latches onto that,
Hmm.
that becomes their full-time job. You've
Yeah.
got to understand at what detriment a program might not get off the ground, for example.
Hmm.
One thing that I always encourage my team to do in the past is to design a program where part of that is your inspection layer,
Hmm.
right? So if you are, teaching an SDR team on how to craft appropriate emails or leverage AI to help you do that more effectively, you need to be inspecting what you expect. You also need to be coaching your managers to inspect what they expect, which, by the way, should be aligned as the same thing. And we can be that force multiplier. I've built relationships with my reps where I know intimately that this individual has trouble positioning value, and I will
Hmm.
call that out to them. They will then in turn send me calls. Hey, I had this call today with XYZ company. Here's the snip where I try to position the value. Did I hit the mark? Like, what do you think? That
Hmm.
type of feedback loop is really strong. And enablement can also be the safe place to do it. That same rep might be fearful to send that to their manager because they don't know if, oh, I'm going to be put on a pip if I didn't do this right, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But if they come to enablement can say, oh, like you totally crushed this. Let's focus on improving this in your next call. They're going to
Mhm.
come back to me to say, okay, I did my next call. What do you think? And if I put the stamp of approval on it and say that's good, they will send that to their manager and say, hey, I wanted to show you how I improved or what I did well. And enablement can be that quiet force in the background,
Mhm.
empowering the reps to do their best work without having the oversight of the pip or
Mhm.
something like that.
Hot seat. Tell me the truth. Would you communicate with the managers if, let's say, a few reps are really struggling with certain things, or you keep it between enablement and the reps to really keep this safe environment for them to come back?
Great question. And I appreciate being on the hot seat because I think this is something that people would want to know.
Yeah.
I would say that it is not a one scenario and the practitioner goes running to the manager or running to the leader unless it's something terribly egregious and HR violations or something, right? Of course. But in the instance of like what we're talking about, I like to give people at bats
Mhm.
to help them improve. That can stay between us. But
Mhm.
I also might go to the manager and just say, like, hey, I've noticed a trend on your team that
Mhm.
objection handling is a challenge, discovery is a challenge. Here's what I've done to help solve that problem.
Mhm.
I've done 6 individual coaching sessions with people on your team. I've teed up 10 resources to articles to read, videos to watch, like whatever the case might be, to demonstrate how I am part of the solution. I would never run to a manager and say, Michael's terrible at objection handling. I've tried to coach him through it. He's awful. Would never do that because that's not what good teammates do. Enablement is all about providing the space for people to do their best work in an effort to deliver the business outcome. So I'm not running around tattletelling on people. I'm here to coach. And if we're doing a lot of coaching and
Mhm.
nothing's happening, that's a business reason to go to the manager and say, here's what I've tried to do. Here's
Mhm.
the resources I've provided. I'm not getting traction. What are you seeing?
Mhm. Look, I love this a lot, but sometimes this is not communicated clearly to reps. So there is a stigma that if I even go back to enablement, they might, talk to my manager about it. Senior leadership might know about like my screw ups. So how do you build a safe space? How do you communicate this? Is it really part of your practice to communicate this publicly that hey, end users like reps, enablement is the safe space. This is for you to come and screw up and I don't know.
I think it's about how we set and manage the expectations with the field.
Hmm.
So I'll give you an example. I'm onboarding 3 new AEs right now.
Mm-hmm.
And every week, I give them a report out based on the practice that we're doing in the AI role play that we're using. I get a synopsis of where they're strong, where they're weak. Okay. Their manager also gets the same report, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I take that report to the AEs and I say, okay, Michael, here is based on what you've contributed, here's where you're working well, here's the area to improve.
Mm-hmm.
I have time on Thursday between 1 and 3. Why don't you and I sit down because I noticed you were struggling to set agendas effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Let's practice how to do that. Between now and Thursday, I want you to go take this lesson or I want you to read this article and you come with me. We're going to talk about it. We're going to practice it. And then I want you to try it again. So I do that with all 3 of my reps every week. And it's only when I start to see week over week over week that there's no improvement. Yeah, the manager and I are having a conversation, but that rep also knows that they're struggling with it. It's no
Mm-hmm.
secret, right? And we have a culture here where we swarm in a good way, right? You're having trouble setting that agenda. Here, let me take a tenured AE and show you how he's setting that agenda. Oh, cool. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think about that. Hey, manager, can I spend 15 minutes in the meeting and like we can all talk about it together? Like there's a cultural component in there as well.
This is amazing, and kudos to your company to build such a culture of openness that people can really collaborate rather than just being scared of doing their job, and that's how you improve, as a team, as not only individual. Look,
Mhm.
you mentioned AI quite a few times, and I know you actually brought some AI tools to the company. Could you share how you actually got adoption from the executive level to end user?
Sure, absolutely. So I joined Zylo in January, and we didn't have anything like this.
Yeah.
I am a team of 1 here, by the way. So I
Mhm.
have to scale all of my efforts.
Mhm.
And when I was looking at the hiring plan for the year and I was understanding where the current challenges were with the team and trying to build onboarding to complement those gaps, right? So we didn't repeat the same thing. It became very apparent to me that on the areas that we were struggling, I would not be able to multiply myself out with
Mhm.
enough hours in the day to coach and help these folks ramp fast. I needed a tool to help me do it. So I really took like a productivity and efficiency route as I was pitching this to the executive team, where I painted the problem of here's what happens current state. I would be spending anywhere between, call it 12 and 15 hours a week coaching.
Mhm.
If I have a tool to help me do this and I can kind of democratize the coaching because I'm having this AI tool do it, I now have 12 to 15 hours a week that I can contribute toward this key metric that we are looking to drive this year, which is around that value selling I had mentioned
Mhm.
earlier. So that was one tactic that I took. And then I just painted out the numbers. I gave them good, better, best pricing. And
Mhm.
you pick, you tell me which one fits our budget and which one's best. We chose that middle path, which was satisfying to both parties, and we were off and running. But I think it was really that business case around where do you want my time to go, and also your reps. We operate on an inbound model here,
Mhm.
so they have to wait for inbound leads to come. So let's spend the time helping them practice and get at
Mm.
bats, as opposed to them just waiting and then practicing on the prospects.
Makes absolute sense. How about the reps? How did you get them actually engaged to go started
Oh,
working?
I got them excited. I got them excited. So, one of the first things I did, Michael, was I set up a plan for them, a vision. Here's what's going to be happening over the next 6 weeks when we implement this tool. You're going to have a go at a certain level, and then I'm going to turn it up a notch. I'm going to make it harder, and we're going to turn it up a notch and make it harder. There's a quite a good competition happening here in the office. Like I got an 89%. Oh yeah, well I got a 91%. Like and they bicker in a wonderfully friendly way about it. So there is a competitive element to it. And I think just having, again, that safe place for them to practice,
Mhm.
a lot of reps don't have that. And we've set up our scenarios in such a way that they are very lifelike. In fact, my chief customer officer was very impressed. He's like, this is like talking to a
Mhm.
client. It's like, cool, good. Like, I need that endorsement. And then that helped the team get excited about it too.
That's fantastic. Again, yeah, as a former rep, current rep, selling for my own company, if you have relevancy and if it's a safe environment and I can do it in my own terms and time,
Yep.
I would give it a shot. Fantastic. Look, I enjoyed this conversation so much. We went a little
Likewise.
bit over. Great having you on the show. If someone wants to reach out to you, can they and how?
Oh, yes. Like most people, I'm on LinkedIn. And you can see me appear there. I don't post as much as I used to, but I still keep in touch with the community in that way and through other enablement communities like Women in Sales Enablement, the Enablement Squad, Sales Enablement Collective. I'm in all of those communities as well.
Megan, we're going to get you on the show again and talk about community and what cannot be changed, with AI. I think that would be a good topic. So, guys, if you're listening to this, she already said yes.
Yes,
We
let's
have
come back. I love it. Wonderful.
Awesome. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, bye for now.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.